This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The views expressed are solely those of the individual speaker and are not intended to malign any group, club, organization, or business.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Confronting the Line and a little bit of Speaking of Cults. Thrilled to have my friend Chris Shelton with me today. I'm going to let folks know I'm recovering from a cold, so there may be some sniffling and coughing and whatnot, but we'll try to keep it to a minimum here. And Chris is recovering himself, actually, so we had quite the holiday season, didn't we?
Oh my God.
Yeah. Every once in a while, your body just says, time out. So this is my coming back, but a lot has happened in the last 3 weeks in the landmark world. And then something particularly got my attention. Well, that's what this episode is going to be about. And I called my friend Chris and I said, I think something shifted in the way that landmark is relating to me. And will you come on and talk to me about it? And I was quite shocked when I kind of told Chris, he's like, oh, you're being fair gamed. I'm like, holy shit, what? So, and by the way, my lawyer friend had also, when I told her about this, she was like, oh, no, something shifted in there. There's some kind of, we don't know the source of it, but there's some kind of aggressive attack coming your way or more aggressive. And for me, it's been a little shocking because I'm kind of like, sort of sick of landmark, like I'm even sort of sick of talking about it. I'm much more interested in talking about the underlying things that have culty, high control groups, the harmful side of personal and professional development, which I'm only interested in talking about because I want to talk about how we can evolve that space to do it better. Like that's really where my heart and commitment is. But anyway, so that's a little bit of setup. Let me just tell you what happened, folks. So I put up a Facebook post over the holidays about, it was a press release article from an attorney who has been helping the victims of Werner's alleged abuse since it became very clear that there was no way to handle it internally. So when this group of Werner staffers came forward, and I was one of a handful of people they came to for help to try and, I'll use some landmark language, get it complete. Well, first make it stop and then get it complete. And because I had been a mentor and coach and to these people, that I was one of the people. And plus I had just finished 10 years of hosting the kind of primary public facing place event where you could be in a room with Werner. So they came to me. Anyway, so there's been various legal actions and whatnot. We don't need to get into all that minutia. I'll put links in the show notes and we'll talk more about it as it evolves. So these ongoing legal actions have been in progress. And there was recently a big, actually really cool, not about the Werner stuff, but for people who want to see exploitation, who see harms, and they want to speak out about it. Otherwise, often known as a whistleblower, right? We could say, I think I'm a whistleblower about the landmark connection to all that. That's what this channel, we've been just trying to tell the truth and trying to look at both the light side and dark side. But unfortunately, it's the dark side that's really coming up because it hasn't had any space to come up for 50 years. So now it's bubbling up. Anyway, so this article, there was a recent hearing regarding an open case happening in the UK. But here's what's remarkable about that hearing. The ruling that came down reified, strengthened the whistleblower protections that had been built in by the Parliament in the UK in 1996. I'll link to the main article that explains this in the show notes. Anyway, so this decision came down on behalf of the whistleblower. And the result of the decision was to really strengthen these laws and clarify. It also took a swipe at the use of arbitration. So a lot of companies and people use arbitration to avoid open court. These guys don't want to get into open court because if you get into open court, then it's about evidence. And if you have evidence, that's not in their favor. So you'll see lots of settlements with NDAs and lots of arbitrations, which are behind confidentiality walls and so on, where things get adjudicated, as it were, and settled. Anyway, I posted an article about this recent happening, and then there was a whole bunch of comments. Okay, great. That's what I posted the article for. Let's talk about this. Like, wow, what do we think? In the midst of this, a couple of posting. I'm not even going to call them people. I mean, there's people behind them, obviously, but it looked like it was ghost posts. Started attacking me. So very, very personally. It wasn't about the discussion about whistleblowing laws. It wasn't even about discussion about these allegations against Werner or all the stuff that's come out about Lamar. It wasn't about any of that. It was about, Anne, you're a horrible person. Everybody hates you. It was very, very personal and intense attack. Then the second identity came on, Moto Dodo, I call him, but it was Moto Dado. It's clearly a fake account with some information, not generally publicly available information. It's employment information about me. It is things I have talked a little bit about, but not a lot. Honestly, guys, I've tried to keep a lot of the details quiet because it makes Landmark look bad. And I don't really want to be about all the salacious, yucky stuff. But these posts were really intense, very personal, very directed, and had references to things that are not widely known. So one of the things I did was call my lawyer, said, what do you think of this? This feels different somehow. This is different than, and you're just not complete. And you just have something to complete with Werner, which is all kind of inside the Landmark lexicon. But something felt really different about this. So I also called my friend Chris, who promptly said to me, you are being fair gamed. So I thought I would use this moment, as I've used all this stuff. My book is a memoir designed to share my experience in hopes that it could help others. And I wanted to use this experience in that same way. So Chris, first, can you just tell me what fair gaming is? What does that mean, really?
Yeah, it's a term that comes from the Church of Scientology specifically. It is an L. Ron Hubbard term for declaring someone or openly labeling someone who was a group member, who was part of the outfit, and importantly, was a loyal part of the outfit, full on member, who has turned their back on the group, on Scientology, and has taken on the role of an ex-member activist, somebody stepping outside the lines who doesn't just disappear, but starts making a nuisance of themselves to whistleblow, expose, discuss what happened with them, as anybody has the right to do. We can communicate about our lives with other people, and it shouldn't be much of a problem. When you declare loyalty to a group like the Church of Scientology, you're becoming part of a group that is not just a bowling club or, online meetup or something. This is a group that takes itself very seriously and has an agenda and a mission. And when you sign on to that agenda and mission, you say, I'm part of this. I want to forward this. I want to make this thing happen. So when you step away from that and start talking about how this group is bad and wrong and doing things that are not okay, immoral, illegal, etc., the group gets a little pissed off. And Hubbard himself got very, very angry with ex members who spoke out because Hubbard had a very vindictive streak in him. He was not a rational, average, ordinary person. He had pathologies. And vindictiveness was definitely one of them. He actually openly in his lectures even talked about it, right? He talked proudly about how he ripped up his critics and tore them a new one and this kind of thing when as a writer, he couldn't even deal with criticism of his written, as a fiction writer. Hubbard really had a problem
Isn't
with
this
that.
one of the signs, like, we're starting to learn about kind of narcissists, like, or malignant narcissists, or I call them kind of disordered. I mean, we're all a little bit narcissistic, but, like, they
Well,
can't take any kind of criticism. This is
yeah, the criticism is very hard for a lot of reasons for people, from ADHD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, to pathology of narcissism, where your whole world revolves around narcissistic supply. And that means admiration, love, care from others, not, hostility and anger and antagonism. Nobody's getting their narcissistic supply with people being mad at them or bad mouthing them. The narcissist can't generate their own self love or self worth. So they need other people to feed it to them. And obviously, criticism and exposing abuses is the exact opposite of that. So, people like Hubbard really do tend to lose their minds over this kind of thing. And so he and like other, let's just say, strong pathological personalities, we can avoid labels, tend to, let's just say, overreact to this kind of thing. You know, if you go down to your local Catholic church or, sign up for a bowling league or something, and you don't find it to your liking and you leave and you go, yeah, I didn't really like it that much, or, I disagree with this and this and this or something, or you kind of make us think about it. It's not going to be a big deal. They're not going to follow you home. They're not going to, try to track your movements. They're not going to find you online and hunt you down and try to ruin your reputation. But people like L. Ron Hubbard do that. And they direct their followers to do that. They write it into the policies and directives of their organizations. And in this case, it was Hubbard labeled it fair game. This person is now fair game for whatever you all want to do to them. We're not going to.
So that's where that term comes from.
That's right. He specifically described it as they are no longer under the protection of the church and its rule system, right? Because they have stepped out of line and are no longer members. Therefore, they are fair game to do whatever you want to them. And that's where the term comes from. This became intensely unpopular and a PR disaster for Hubbard. And so 1969, he threw something out publicly that said, we're not going to use this term anymore. And we're not going to, fair game people anymore. But he made it clear in the language of the cancellation that he was really only canceling the term, not the practice. And that's why Scientology got away with continuing to fair game people as they do all the way to now, but they don't call it that anymore.
That trait of saying something but meaning something else, I kind of call it weaponized accuracy. And it's something that's very prevalent around in the landmark culture. They'll use this impeccability or it's more accuracy. Say, no, I'm saying this, not all this other stuff, even though it's totally rational to assume that all this other stuff is what somebody would think who was reading that or seeing that or whatever. So interesting now, and I'm going to actually share the incident of what happened in this, and we're going to kind of use that to take this apart. But first, that was great. And wasn't it the case, I think we've pretty much found out now, that at some point, Hubbard declared Werner Erhard fair game. I mean, it was pretty well
There's a difference between fair game and Scientology and another term they use, another label they use, which is suppressive. And often people who leave the church and speak out publicly are labeled suppressive too. You are a suppressive person. This is a statement of your character. This is a statement of your personality. This is the church labeling you a psychotic criminal, because that's what a suppressive person is in Scientology. And Hubbard makes it crystal clear in his writings that only a psychotic criminal would attack Scientology, would speak badly about it, would come into the organization, find it to his disliking, and leave quickly and try to tear it down. Hubbard had all kinds of, colorful language for this kind of thing. If you're not a former member of Scientology, then you cannot be fair gamed because it's very specific to that. They all come after and harass you and stuff like that. But anyway, I don't want to mince, split hairs here on all this terminology, but Werner Erhard was declared suppressive, and he was declared what's called a squirrel, meaning he took Scientology, pure Scientology, and he altered it for his own purposes and called that alteration his own invention when he was really just ripping off L. Ron Hubbard. Hubbard made that claim about a lot of people because he didn't like people using his stuff without giving him money. And he wanted to make money off of his, and he considered if it was written in Scientology, it's mine, it's nobody else's. Well, a lot of people have taken bits and pieces of Dianetics and Scientology and gone off and started their own groups with it. At the end of the day, Ron Hubbard copied everything and took it and made it into Scientology. So he's really just accusing others of what he himself did. And Werner was at the top of that list. He hated Werner and he hated Est. And factually, now that I've really dived into this, he was right that Werner did take Scientology and alter
We
it and
know
make
that
it into
now, right?
things, but he didn't.
Martin's account.
All of Est is not only based on Scientology. Werner took a lot of stuff from a lot of places, but he took a lot of Scientology. And
And I
Hubbard
think
never forgave him for that. And that's why the conflict.
a place, because since I wrote my book, so all this stuff happened that I never expected. One of them was literally for almost a year. It's been almost 2 years now, but for the first year, I mean, probably 10 hours a day of messages from every platform known to humankind. I was hearing from people. And one segment of people that I heard from is people who were really around early in the day, in the 70s. I feel like I have like a whole library of unauthorized, in other words, not condoned by them, right? But people come to me and told me all these stories and stuff. And so I've definitely heard from somebody who went to work for us in 1975, I believe they said, and their job was to bring over Scientology. They were very high up in the Scientology auditing structure. I mean, it's all over. And it's particularly in the business practices is where I see a lot of it. And Marsha Martin, in her book, Power, Sex, and Transformation, she tells a little bit about, because she was one of the very first staffers and how they used Scientology, her story about the staff getting out and translating the Scientology dictionary, as it were. I've actually heard that from about 5 people now, not just Marsha. So yeah, he clearly used, and like you said, my yoga man guru did the same thing. Part of what he hired me for is because I went and I said, hey, you're using Landmark stuff and other stuff. You can't do that. You can't just take people's work and then put your name on it, change it a little bit. That doesn't work. So he actually hired me to help codify his own work from his own amalgamation, right? Putting together all these different ingredients. So Werner was declared a squirrel. And what's interesting is if you read the Bartlett authorized biography, Werner's quite complimentary of Scientology. I think he really liked it when he was running his encyclopedia and sales business. They used Scientology stuff to be better performers. I mean, that was before there was Est. Near as I can tell from the things people have told me, they were definitely using Scientology methods to clear themselves. And then, of course, we still have all that language, right? My job as a wisdom course leader in part was to be a clearing for and keep clear the staff and program leaders. That was one of our aims inside of the organization, none of which I understood to be Scientology anything until much later. Okay, so suppressive, squirrel, fair game. I
Yep.
do want to say, so it's interesting because I feel like Landmark as a group has taken on a lot of these practices, but they're way watered down or they're way lighter. Because Landmark has tried so hard and done an pretty decent job probably of, we're just a seminar company. We're not a religion. They fight vehemently against why they're so mad at me is because I dared to use the C word, ask the question. Never mind that I was asked that question constantly as a representative for them. People would say to me all the time, wasn't that a cult? Isn't that? I mean, it's so talked about around Landmark. It's kind of silly to me that they've never really authentically waded into the question. So that's what I attempted to do with my book. I attempted to authentically wade into the question. And I'll be honest, I haven't liked most of the answers. I just haven't. It's been hard. And so they have the marketing department, which I affectionately refer to as the Department of Defense. Anybody who's been in a Landmark body or whatnot, you've probably heard from the Department of Defense, because the first thing that happens is if you leave Landmark and you had any kind of role, you hear from them, do not use, if you try to use any of our work, even the same words. One of the accusations that this person made was actually about a cease and desist letter that Landmark sent me in 2020. I talk about it a little bit in my book. It was one of the things that was what? What? Me? I'm one of your most loyal lieutenants. What do you mean you think I'm trying to take your work? I'm what? I didn't have any of these terms then. I've noticed in myself recently, I've gotten myself in a few things where I engage with people or in relationships or groups, and I kind of see something isn't right about them because they do something yucky to another person, but somehow I think I'm exempt because I'm so likable. I'm so loyal. I'm so, I love how you're laughing.
If only if only you were the only one.
God, it's just
Yes,
crazy,
it's
right?
very, very common with people.
Wow. So that
Yeah,
was part of, so I'm going to actually say what this person accused, and why it really caught my attention is because the only way whoever this person, and we did figure out it was a fake, it's like a ghost profile on Facebook. And I didn't remove it from my comment threads. Either Facebook did or they did. I don't know who removed it, but I happen to have screenshot it. One of the accusations was Landmark sent you a cease and desist letter instructing you to stop using contact lists for personal or non-Landmark purposes that were provided to you or that were generated while working on the Being a Leader course. And you had to get your lawyer involved to argue that you had every right to use those lists. Here's why that got my attention. Only somebody who's being talked to by somebody on the inside would know that,
of course.
would know about that. That's
Right.
that's disinformation. Yes, I did get a letter. It didn't say cease and desist. It said some other things. I mean, it just said, you can't use these lists. And like, I'll just throw it in here really quick. I don't have anything to hide about this. I've talked about it in private groups, but it was very, very simple. When we started the Being a Leader project, it was my company that hosted it. I was the host. I wasn't a person who assists. I wasn't a volunteer. It wasn't a little project I did on the side. No, I set up an event company who signed contracts, took on considerable financial liability, and hosted a course that featured Werner Erhart, Mike Jensen, Carrie Granger initially, and Steve Zaffron. And a body of work that they were out to develop ostensibly to give away to academia, introducing into academia an ontological, phenomenological approach to leadership. That was the project. My whole book is about, read the book, guys, to get the basic story. This is a little bit deeper because this thing caught my attention. I was like, I talk about it a little bit, but not in this thing. So fast forward, when I dropped that project, and I'm like, wow, I've built this whole model for helping people, for hosting programs and helping gurus get their work in the world. How great. Let's use it. And I wanted to use it actually for Landmark. I wanted to keep it in service initially, right up until they sent me this letter. So we were going to host a free webinar, 2020, pandemic shutting everything down. I'm creating this new project with a couple of really great humans that had some amazing work, one of which was Mission Control, which is actually an offshoot from Landmark. We were going to host something which got canceled, obviously, by the pandemic, but we were going to host this whole thing about how do you actually have a leadership project really happen? And it was going to center around Mission Control, and I had this whole offer for Landmark. We were going to actually get Landmark to partner with us. And I mean, we just had I had this whole vision. It was all supporting Landmark and the Landmark Forum and what I'd always been about, which is this work in the world. Anyway, so then when I had started the Being a Leader course, to get it started, Landmark shared 2 lists with me from previous courses that they had done in which Werner had made an appearance. And we sent emails to those lists, inviting them to the initial Being a Leader courses. I signed a little agreement, my event company, with Landmark that said I would not use those 2 lists for anything other than marketing the Being a Leader course. Okay. Fair enough. I mean, I was just there to help Landmark and get Werner's work in the world. Anyway, so then just fast forward, again, kind of high level notes, but I purged those lists in 2014. We used them a couple of times. People did the course, they didn't do the course. We got rid of them. We started marketing. We started social media marketing. This is like 2014. So now we're signing up people onto a marketing list from all kinds of things, emails, social media, Facebook ads, blah, blah, blah. And in the agreement I had with the instructors, those marketing lists, those belong to Innovative Event Management. Those marketing lists contractually did not belong to anybody other than Innovative Event. And so anyway, that's what my lawyer came back and said. You can't say that people that signed up with innovative event management are customer records of Landmark. Like, that's not a thing. So their letter to me basically said, if you do business in any Landmark graduates, you market to them or they do your programs, you're violating your agreement. We're going to sue you.
Sure.
And I was like, I don't think they own people. I'm pretty sure that's not right. So I called my lawyer and I said, wait, and he goes, no, doesn't make sense. Like, no, this isn't right. So we had our little lawyers exchange, They wanted me to purge completely my whole history of having to do anything with being a leader. I bet they're really wishing I'd said yes to that about now. But anyway, so that was what really happened there. Is like they sent this whole letter threatening me. My lawyer went back and said, no, we did agree. I dropped the entire marketing list. Anybody that was identifiable as a Landmark graduate, we actually took them out of existence, even though we did not have to legally do that. And that kind of set off, that was, if you read my book, that's the chapter 8 betrayal. I'm like, wait a minute, but I'm a friend here. I'm trying to find ways to introduce people to the Landmark Forum and it was that was what set off the whole thing for me, actually. So anyway, that's a little bit about what actually happened in that point. But that somebody knows about that and is posting that in a way, what that said to me is that there are people, whether it's an official policy or it's just, but at the very least, somebody on the inside or higher up or engaged deep in Landmark is gossiping and putting out misinformation about me.
Right.
And my professional endeavors. That's what was like, whoa, this. So and that's when I said to you, and you're like, oh, that's like fair gaming.
Because in Scientology, what we had was access to people's private confessionals. And in Scientology, members confess everything. And it's all written down. And the most intimate details of their lives, from relationships to business to crimes they've committed, everything. Scientology demands full transparency in order to do the project of Scientology and moving, to the stated goal of personal spiritual immortality and freedom and all of that. You agree to follow, do what they tell you. And so when they are doing these confessionals, they're writing everything down that you're telling them, and they keep it in folders. You could call them dossiers, and they have many, many, many folders. And they make a point of getting this information from you and then keeping it, in these folders, in these closets. But if you step out of line, it's not a threat that they tell you. They just do it. If you leave the church, they don't go, well, we're going to let, all this information out. There have been one or two times where, some underhanded statements were made, but generally speaking, they don't let you know first. They just take the information that they know about you and they start dishing it out publicly through websites, press releases, tweets, social media posts, comments exactly like the ones you were getting, very highly directed to you personally. This is a comment to you, right? It's not just some general comment on the post you made, right? The ones you read were
it was directly,
and,
yeah,
you blah, blah, right?
Well, the whole thing was about somebody had accused me, and this is so common. It's kind of a little bit boring, but kill the messenger rather than deal with the message. Like, to me, that's been going on for a while. Like, I've had a handful of people that are
this is called an ad hominem attack. It's a logical fallacy. It's been around since Latin. That's why we have a term for it. I mean, this is as old as people. It's called misdirection, right? I don't want attention on the bad thing I've done, so I'm going to make everybody look at all the bad things you've done, right? Because they're obviously, somebody, and there's a number of reasons, there's a number of things they're trying to do in these fair game, openly vicious harassment campaigns. You could call it that too. There are things they're trying to get done. It works at a lot of different levels. They're trying to intimidate you, back you off, make you shut up. That's the primary goal.
Okay, right.
Shut you down. Right.
It's so good what you're saying here, Chris. Thank you for distinguishing this. And by the way, you guys, Chris is my favorite deconstructor programmer. You're watching a live session with Ann and Chris. So that Yeah, that's why this felt different. Like, I was like, ooh,
Mhm.
wow. Like, this isn't a graduate who's fully sort of indoctrinated in the landmark, distinctions. I've heard lots of we'll do a whole episode about getting complete because I have a whole thing about that, but lots of people are like, I must be pointing out and bringing, putting public attention on the dark side of transformation because I have a grievance, which just by itself is like, yeah, I have a grievance. They're hurting people. And they wouldn't do anything about it. We tried and tried and tried. And now I know hundreds of people have tried for almost 50 years. I didn't know that when I first published my book. And I'm like, wow. But it doesn't seem to me. So, what you're describing in Scientology does seem like it was an it was from the leader, L. Ron Hubbard. It was an organizational practice and policy that I'm aware of. And, I was pretty deep in and high up in Landmark. I'm pretty sure they don't have any written policy like this or whatnot. They have definitely a practice of intimidation and threatening people. Typically, it's
Mhm.
guised around, you can't use our work. They take it a little step further and they say, you can't do anything that's similar to our work because anything you would do is derivative. And if so they go, it's not just like you can't use the distinction the way that it was taught to you or particularly as a leader or trainer. You can't use anything like it either, because our view is the only way you know that is because we taught it to you, which is such a load of crap because I now am so clear every distinction and idea in Landmark is based mostly in, known ideas or something else or whatnot. And it's been twisted, turned, tweaked so they could call it theirs and sell it as a
That's right.
proprietary material, which I don't, I think that's a problem in our commerce system, but it's bigger than just Landmark.
Well, it is, but it's a real statement. I see it as a very bald-faced statement of accusing others of what you yourself have done. And this is classic human psychology that goes back to, when there were three people around. I mean, it's just this endless effort of misdirection. And don't look at me, look at you. Don't look at me, look at them. And this is how predators have navigated social circumstances to avoid responsibility and accountability for what they do to people or what they do in general, which is, in this case, with L. Ron Hubbard or with a Werner Erhard, I'll say it, they're plagiarists, right? They just take things from other people, steal their ideas, and then claim that they're the ones who came up with it. Werner did this hundreds of times with Scientology principles alone, much less other things. So, and he was doing it from before EST even existed. He was using Scientology principles to train his office staff and openly using them, right? And so this
Not
is why
only
Werner develops this sort of paranoia of anybody who leaves is going to rip me off. Well, he's just speaking right out of his own awareness of his own,
Okay, so tell me what you
sort of
think of this, though,
pathology, right?
because working with Werner, and I'm now clear that, even the Werner that I worked with, which was mostly a kind, fine guy, like I didn't, there was, I mean,
Sure,
again, it's all outlined in
sure.
my book, and they keep a very separate, so Werner's over here and Landmark's over here, and they pretend that they're not connected. Now, that's total bullshit. They're connected in every which way, he's the source, it's all built on Werner's ideas, blah, 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 blah. We're in London working with Werner, like Werner's been involved in every aspect. I now know that. I didn't know that before. I came in the era where it was like, nope, Werner sold the work to his employees. How we all sort of ignored that his employees happened to be his brother and sister. Never really got that. I know it sounds so silly now. Like I feel so silly, but I'm telling you guys, and there's people listening to me, you believed it too. So, and we're smart people.
Intelligence has nothing to do with it, as
One
we
of the
like to
things
say.
that struck me, and somebody just called me out on my YouTube channel for this too, is when I worked with Werner, like I remember this one time we were sitting in a room and I said, I don't know, we were talking about the work or whatever, and something came up about Landmark and the proprietary materials agreement, which is the agreement you sign every time you do a course that says, I will not use this work for anything other than my own personal use, da 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 da. Okay, fine. Anyway, Werner heard about that and he goes, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I said, oh yeah, no, there's this agreement. I started explaining to him about the proprietary materials and he goes, I want to see that. Now, what was funny is one of his kind of core staff members who's paid by Landmark but works for Werner. Anyway, she was hilarious. She was behind him going, oh, like trying to tell me to shut up. But I had that experience quite a few times where Werner would hear about something that Landmark was doing because he's not involved at that point. This is like 2013, 2014, 2015. I would come to hear in 2020, he was back involved in daily operations for a couple of years there. But back then, he's got this distance. He's over here. They consult with him. They talk to him. They da-da-da-da. But L. Ron Hubbard was sitting there doing these writings. And then there's this whole army of people that are living it out. It's not exactly like that in Lamb.
Well, I could draw more parallels you may not be aware of in terms of when Hubbard withdrew from management and was no longer running Scientology either. Werner's not an original thinker. He even copied Hubbard on that when he needed to extricate himself from all the legal and PR mess that he had made because of his disgusting personal life. And that was bleeding over into, in the 70s and 80s, this was all being exposed. And Werner needed to separate his awful from Est Landmark, Forum. It was going through major changes. And this was why, because Werner was being exposed, with his bizarre family life, cheating, all the rest, and his abuse of his own employees, right? And so there was a separation there. Hubbard tried to do the same thing. And this is why I look at it as carbon copy. And it's very easy for me to see, knowing everything I know now about Hubbard, that Werner was just running the same playbook, right? Appear to withdraw, appear to back away, make it look like I'm not connected in any way with the organization, but he's keeping tabs on it the whole time.
Well, and it seems like this is a really common, come on, human beings have been around a while. Is it really anything? Son, probably not. But it's a common predatory behavior, right? So I'm going to save my own behind. And I think, the story was, and I think the people that execute this believe in it fully and save the work. It's all about saving the work. Like why it took me 3 years and some other happenings to even say the most minimal things, which my book doesn't get into any of the dirty detail. It just is like, hey, because I knew these lawsuits were coming. I knew it was going to get exposed. In my book, I was like, I had just spent 3 years kind of dealing with what I knew was going to be coming out publicly at that time, I thought it was going to be a year. Now it looks like it's going to be the next 5 years, whatever. But it's coming. And now, of course, we know it's already all come out before. Outrageous betrayal. Like this is all the same stuff that was discovered in 1990, the 60 Minute special, all this, right?
Yep.
It's exactly the same kind of thing.
Yep.
But my question about this fair gaming thing is because it seems to me like whoever wrote this, Mr. Moto Dodo, that's what I call him. It's Dado is the thing, but Moto Dodo, fake Facebook person, which that's a whole other thing. At least I'm using my real name and my real face. And I did that. I made that choice very actively because I think, one, it makes me credible. And it matches my commitment and my stand. But also I said, I kind of elected myself because I knew I have a commitment to, when Landmark does something good, I'll say it. In fact, we're going to record an episode on Sunday about something they did recently that was actually a good thing.
Cheers.
So Moto, I'm kind of wondering, like, I don't have any evidence that Landmark as an organization, Mick Levitt is the president, who's actually a guy I really like and think is a good guy. I think he's totally indoctrinated and brainwashed, but I think he's a good human. I actually think Harry Rosenberg is a good human. He's now the head of the board, not the CEO. I may still be naive, but who knows? I may continue to learn that that's not true, but I'm hanging on to that as long as I can. I don't have any evidence that they are strangling their staff or, punching people, all that kind of stuff, or stealing their money or whatever. They are covering that behavior. They are condoning it, but they're not doing it that I'm aware of. I don't have any evidence that Moto Dodo or this other person, I think her name was this other identity, Melanie Daniels. Those are the two that were kind of doing these really aggressive attacks. But it's this Moto Dodo thing with some insider knowledge, which would imply Landmark insiders somewhere are putting out misinformation or disinformation about me.
Could be.
Whether it's intentional or just gossip, which is such a violation of their own standard. But we now know the hypocrisy is deep there. They do not, in the staff and program leader world, they do not go by and live by their own teaching. But did this happen in Scientology? Like, it may very well be that this is just some actor that totally loves and adores Werner and thinks I'm trying to take him down, and they're going to come get me.
Exactly. It's very
May
hard to
not
tell.
be like
Yeah.
official. Okay, everybody, here's some dirt on Anne. Go.
Right.
Right.
Right. There are many, many ways that these groups or individuals can exhibit, or do these campaigns, these fair game harassment, and public attack campaigns. Let's just call it that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of levels to it. There are, it's all a matter of trying to get a couple things to happen. I mentioned already, backing you off is target number one. That's the number one thing they want to do with this, is make your life difficult because you're doing things they don't like you doing, whistleblowing, speaking out, doing shows, whatever. So the first target is back you off, make you afraid, intimidate you. Along with that comes trying to put out public statements that nullify what you're saying. And whether they do
That's what
that,
these are, right?
right? Whether they do that by misdirection, through some ad hominem, through, there's a litany of ways you can nullify what somebody is saying. If you convince other people, for example, she's just Anne, she just has an axe to grind.
This has a grievance.
Well, these kind of phrases immediately are nullification. They're trying to, your intentions are not pure, right? We're going to somehow make you the problem, not landmark the problem, right?
I still reflexively try to protect these people. I mean, I still reflect. That's why I haven't.
That's probably something you might want to take a look at now, because that's might not be the best thing to do.
If they would leave me alone, they'd probably find me much less of an enemy. I mean, even the shows I've been doing.
There's another thing underlying this, though, which we can talk about, right? But in terms of what they're trying to accomplish, the backing you off and the nullifying what you're saying are two things. There's a couple other things here too, which is part of the backing you off or trying to intimidate you is also trying to trigger your hypervigilance, right? Trying to trigger you so you are constantly freaking out. You never know where the attacks are going to come, right? When it's a campaign, when it's not just, I'm not just talking about one or two comments here. Well, I'm talking about when they really rev it up, or you start going through your trash and having people follow you around and stuff like that. When we start getting into like in real life kind of stuff, this sort of thing Leah Remini, receives, right? The sort of thing that Scientology is pretty famous for. That's all about trying to get you, so freaked out, right? That you just quit. And then the last thing is, and it's not obvious on this one, but the other thing they're trying to do is reinforce current members' beliefs, right? Because they know that people will come around and look at what you're saying, and they want to make sure that those folks not only don't hear what you're saying because they're going to listen to you or read you, but immediately cancel and nullify, right? And reinforce the belief system itself. Right? You didn't get what's the term? Close? You didn't close complete, right?
Complete.
You didn't complete. This is the landmark terminology, right? Well, I don't even know what it means, but landmark people do. So they read that and they go, there it is. And now I don't have to listen to you. It's called a thought-stopping cliche. In Scientology, we have labels like SP, PTS, right? We just throw these labels around. You're just a suppressive person, an SP. As soon as I say that, everything you say is nullified to me if I'm a Scientologist, right? So those
Well, because he starts the post with no grievance, ? No bitterness, ? No upset, ? No axe to grind. Really? So he's not even, this person isn't using the complete stuff. Lots of other people have, but
sure.
But this grievance, bitterness, whatever. And I keep saying, actually, no, I'm pretty apathetic. I don't have any axe to grind with Werner. All I have is what I would have with any human being. Stop hurting people. Clean up your mess. Make amends. And, knock it off. It's not, to me, it's not complicated, but I think there's no grievance, no bitterness, no upset. And we're seeing this a lot all over in our society, where rather than look at the action or impact or whatever, we go, but look at the
right. We're very, very much into personalities right now. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it is as
especially
a
in Western worlds. Yeah, Western countries.
this thing you said about freaked out and quit, I think that's really that's really important too, certainly in this experience. But I think one thing that Landmark has done really well is they pre-freak people out. That's why
Oh, yeah.
hundreds of people have told me their
Mhm,
stories
mhm.
about use, about harm, da 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 da, because I'm now safe. I'm a safe person because they read my book and they know, oh wow, she hears and but more and more people are starting to speak out. I think why this is coming up is because a recent article came out, which I'll link in the show notes, in the London Times. It's about this legal case that's going on and this hearing that just happened, which was put some of this information in the public domain. And a reporter, Adam Luck, is following that. And he saw that information and he wrote an article in the London Times about the allegations of abuse against Warner. And it's the first direct reporting since the 90s about that.
Mhm.
And even media outlets are incredibly shy about reporting on this story because in 91, Landmark, I don't know if they sued or threatened to sue, but they got 60 Minutes to take down the 60 Minutes piece that had been done. Now, everything that's in that 60 Minutes piece, I have heard repeated and corroborated, except for the sexual assault accusations. Um, that but that's a like 30 seconds in the 15-minute piece. But the physical abuse is identical to what, now fast forward 2018, 2019, 2020, several of Werner staffers saying, no, they abused me. Anyway, so because they were able to get 60 Minutes to remove that, media has been we're not going to touch those people. And they've been
Mhm.
so litigious in the past. They don't win these lawsuits, but they intimidate people.
Just
And
like Scientology.
the other grip that they have on graduates is even those of us that then see these kinds of hypocritical behaviors, the abuse. I mean, the worst is the abuse. The hypocrisy is like so wide and deep. We'd have to have like encyclopedia volumes to count all the times of that. But we don't talk about it because one, we don't want to get attacked. They've already scared us ahead. And two, the bigger thing is we're so indoctrinated that the work is transforming the world that we don't want to take that away from people.
Sure.
Is that a piece in here too? It's like, if I
Oh, yeah.
tell
Yeah.
people what really goes on in Landmark staff and program leader bodies, then all these people are making a difference. You told me once, I said, gosh, lots of people are saying the organization's bad, but the work is good. And you said, yeah, that's step one. You said that to
Yeah,
me.
that's right. That's always step one. It's a multi-phase process leaving a group like this. That's the whole point. It's not about a light switch moment and suddenly it all just goes away. When you are indoctrinated into a system of belief, what that means is that the ideas have been sort of laid in or accepted or sunk in, you could say, into your psyche at a level where you're not thinking or questioning them anymore. They become habits, they become routines, they become, this is the way I map reality. And when it gets to that level, it's not about, just some good ideas. It's about your identity. You start attaching these ideas to who you are, how you see the world, how the world makes sense to you, right? I have to complete with this person or whatever, right? You start using this language and these ideas in the very fabric of how you navigate your life and create relationships and things like that. These become that level of belief and importance to you. And you believe these things because, you believe they are helping you or for whatever reason you think that. Just say, though, that what happens is once you realize, as you or other people do, that, oh, wait a minute, something's wrong here. Now we have conflict.
Yeah.
Right that's where the noise starts, the cognitive dissonance, right? That's when it begins. And we habitually will resolve that noise in favor of our group, right? In favor of our belief set. And it takes a while to extricate those things. Because once you start realizing, oh, I can't resolve it, this doesn't resolve, this is abusive behavior and I can no longer deny it, that doesn't make all those deep-seated beliefs just go away. Right? You got to dig that stuff out. You got to extricate it. It took a while for you to attach those things to your identity. It's going to take a little while to let them go. And that's the source of the conflict of, but I'm hurting this group. This is a good thing, but it's abusive. And the back and forth of this. And this is the struggle you and all of us have gone through.
The easy rationale is, oh, it's just some bad people or the
Right.
organization is a shitty business.
That's right.
Like, okay, then I can put all the bad stuff over here and I don't have to question the beliefs, which are also tied together. I think this comes up in your REM model really well. I think, you bring this piece out, which is, so you do these programs and it does, we now understand there's a whole dopamine high that happens. There's an experiential element, which we now kind of understand the neuroscience of. But there's the experiences that stick most in our psyche, believe it or not, even over traumatic experiences, those stay in our body. But what stays in our mind, our psyche, are awe experiences. So the forum and the advanced course, LGATs are designed to create awe. So what happens at the end of these programs is you go, this program transformed my life. And you give the credit of the transformation, you misplace it. You put it in the program or in the organization, or in this case, the work, rather than no, you had an insight, you had a shift in how you saw something, and you use that productively or not.
Exactly.
Right? So that's what's really happening. They attach to it the landmark, and then graduates, there's this army of people that go out and go, Landmark saved my life. Werner Erhard saved my life. S saved my life. La,
Yep.
la, la, la.
Yep.
That, what is that? Is that like an emotionally, what is it? Because I talk to people who that's 30, 40 years since they did the S training.
Mm-hmm.
And one of
Well,
the
if
most,
they've never been called to question it, right?
uh
If that noise never happened because they never let themselves see or think about criticism or skepticism or whatever, or question the experience in any way, then they simply have accepted what they've been told and they've carried on with their life. And it worked for them, right? This is an explanation that makes sense, so I'm going to hold on to it. I had this, it was Werner Erhard and he came up with his amazing stuff and I had this transformative experience. And it's a narrative that makes sense. So I don't need to question it and I will continue to hold on to it. And because it was a transformative peak experience as I see it, I defend it. You can't take it feels like it's something that changed me for the better. So I might not understand the reasons why it did that, but I don't have to and I don't care. I feel better, right? It's really no different than I really enjoyed that Twinkie. Like, great. That doesn't mean that you just gave yourself a health bomb. But if they told it to you, if they said, hey, here's a Twinkie, and not only does it taste great, but it's all the nutrition you need today. And the person bought it and accepted that idea. And you come along and go, a Twinkie is not nutritional, dude. The first thought is not going to be, oh, really? The first thought's going to be, no, it is. And you're wrong for trying to tell me otherwise, right? Because they've connected these two things together so solidly. And it's a ridiculous example, but I'm just trying to make a point,
no,
right?
it's perfect.
That we hold on to this stuff. And it's the peak experience that is the source of the defense because you're trying to take it away from me. How dare you? You can't take that away from me. It was a very special, transformative moment. And if it's wrong, if Werner's wrong, if this is all wrong, I can't have had that. And you're taking it away from me and you're lessening my identity. You're lessening my power. And I'm going to fight you because I don't want you to do that to me. Right. And that's the source of that internal conflict. Right. Or at least one way to put it.
It's so interesting to me, like, because to me, it's just not complicated. I mean, I made some amazing decisions. I did the Landmark Forum. I made totally the right decision to, leave my abusive husband. The occasion of the Landmark Forum was a big turning point in my life. I talk about it in my book. I talk about it everywhere. I don't have any problem holding the value that I produced for myself while participating and being a leader. All the incredible experiences, even traveling around with Werner and like staying in all these hotels and like, that was pretty cool shit, man. Like, it was awesome. I love all that. That's why when people tell me I have a grievance, I'm like, no, actually, I really like it. But it doesn't change the fact that there's all these dirty dealings going on in the background, and I found out about them. It did change, like, I now wouldn't recommend the forum actually to people. I wouldn't, but I also don't recommend Chick-fil-A or Hobby Lobby,
Right.
y because those organizations support, things that I think are damaging to our society. I'm just now starting to, like, really get into the ideas because my overall commitment is the safe and ethical practice of personal and professional development. So I'm, like, now finding the line. That's what this whole show is about. Well, so that's interesting. Let me just touch on, just to finish off this post, and we'll put up some graphics of it. The other 2 points, just kinda quickly, not sure the exact details, but you asked Werner for additional money that you believed you were owed for your work on being a leader. Here's what's hilarious about that. Werner was the one that told me I should ask for extra. So I had cut my fee in half and I said, half my fee I'm going to give as an in-kind contribution to the effort. And then I figured out along the way that I was actually losing money. Like, I was actually funding money into this project. I wasn't making money. I was actually losing money. Anyway, but it actually came all around this funny moment in 2018, and I don't even know how Werner and I were talking about it. Anyway, I said something about, I said, "Oh, well, I give half my fee, back into the project." And he looked at me and he goes, "Why?" This is what I mean. This is why I get confused about Werner sometimes, because Werner was pretty great to me. So Werner looks at me and he goes, "Why are you doing that? That's stupid. Don't do that. Why are you doing that? Don't do that." And that was actually, and then I went and looked, I'm like, huh, interesting. And then I went and did some work on my books, and that's when I figured out I was losing money. So then I went to the Werner's people who run all his business, and I went to Barbara Stevenson's her name. Anyway, I went to her and I said, "Barbara, I actually just figured out I'm actually losing money. So I'm going to need to take our next offering," which I think at that point was going to be, it was either 2018 or 2019. I said, "I need to take a little bit more of my fee. I got to at least break even." You would have thought all hell broke loose. Like, it was crazy, crazy. They also wanted me to give the money out sooner because I would use the money from one course to help finance. I'm not a wealthy person. I know people think I am. I'm not. And I was funding this thing, but I was able to use the money from one course to fund the next course. And then when the next course happened, I would give it all off to the Earhart Jensen Initiative. Got close to $2.5 million by the end is what we raised. So not only did they want to not let me take, I wanted to take 15%. My fee was 20. I'd been taking 10. I wanted to take 15. That was my, what I said. And I don't technically have to ask these people. It's my company. They're actually the client. So I could technically raise the price. Anyway, it was funny. And she was like, "No, we got it." Because everything was about putting as much money in the Earhart Jensen Initiative as we could.
Yeah, he never took 10% when it was 20, right?
Right. Which is
He
probably
never
why
cut
he
his
looked at me and
fee.
said, "Why are you doing that?"
Right. It made no sense to him. I'm positive it made no sense to him at all that you were doing that, because he would never do that.
Right.
It would
That
never even
really
occur to
he
him to
was
do that.
there. Yeah.
Just wouldn't be a thing, right? So he looks at you and goes, "What?" But his staff, who he knows are slaving for him, are like, "What? This is the most, ethical, moral dilemma you could possibly have created. How could you dare to take your contracted fee? You awful person." I mean, this is the highlight of the difference between the leader and the follower dynamic. I mean, this is
And
exactly
what's
where
this
it's at.
role of these people? So you got it's because I saw this in the Yoga Man dynamic too. Like, it was interesting.
Mm.
Like, he had like plausible deniability also. He had a person who's actually a fabulous human who I still love today, but working for him, he was horrible to her. And she did some horrible things on his behalf because she was, her job was to make his organization work. So it's kind of like they keep this distance. So they're people, I don't know what to call them, the enablers.
In a circle,
Yeah, they do the
staff.
dirt deeds.
Exactly. That's the way the leader. This is group 101. This has been since we had first groups, right? It's the way to keep the leader plausible deniability, right? Separate, but equal, but not really equal, but separate, right? Like, buffer zone, right? The staff are the ones who fall on their sword for the leader. That's their job. protect the leader. This is the hills. This is very, very old stuff.
And I can see how it all translated, the staff of Landmark kind of falls on the sword. So, the biggest thing people have told me said, "Oh my God, I thought it was just me. I thought it only happened to me."
That's
That's the first thing. And
That's
then the
right.
second,
Siloing information is another big one with these guys, right? Because not everybody, even in the inner circle, not everybody knows everything. People kind of assume they do. They don't. One of the superpowers of predatory leaders is their ability to silo information and dish it out very carefully because information is power at that level.
and it's my personal opinion, mostly because I just really like Mick Levitt, that they're actually keeping secrets from Mick Levitt about this situation happening with Warner.
Probably.
Seen some things that lead me to think that
Sure.
some
Sure. And sometimes this creates all kinds of trouble for the organization. This is not the best way to be running things. I mean, I hope we all understand this is how predators and dictators and authoritarians run things. This isn't how we
That's why I
should be
wanted to
running
use
things.
this. I'm like, if I'm going to go through this, I'm going to share this because it's happening all over. I have a lot of people say, well, it's not just Landmark. All corporations are corrupt and corrosive. And I'm like, and so?
Right. We do have
Didn't we
issues.
talk
We
about
do.
that?
Yeah, we do. The problem with these groups is that it's not just a corporation, right? It invests identity and personal belief, and people get pretty extreme about this. And that's where I come in. Is I don't care what people believe, but when you believe it to the exclusion of human rights and decency for other people, and you're putting this organization or the leader first over the law, common
Right.
sense, right,
Your
relationships,
own needs. I
family.
mean, I didn't know it, but for several years, I subsidized the Bleeding a Leader course with my own
Right.
income. I mean, I'm
Right.
still trying to recover financially. So I don't have a grievance about that. I more have like, ooh, lesson learned. So
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
because I got I was a part of all that. I got it now. And I can see where I went along with a lot of things because I believed because this organization has such a powerful, it's built very much around integrity. I couldn't imagine that they wouldn't act with integrity. So when something came up and I was like, well, that seems kind of funny. It doesn't seem like it has integrity, like seems weird, but I would go, but they're the authority on integrity. So I'll just default to their view.
And again, REM model, right? There's rationalizations, right?
Right.
24/7, right? It's
Right.
it's what this is best at.
Well, because even at one point, I wanted to have the instructors, which for me in hosting the course, they were my clients, them and the customers that were coming to do, those were my customers, the people who were signing up with Innovative Event Management to register in this program. Those were Innovative Event Management customers. They were signing up to be in a program with Werner Earhart, Mike Jensen, Steve Zaffron, and it was Kerry Granger, then Jerry Echeverria. So at one point, because I was really uncomfortable with the way we had a contract in the background and I contracted with different entities at different times. And basically the contract just laid the basic ground rules of how the course would be operated, who would handle the money, which was me, how it would be dispersed at the end, which was to the Earhart Jensen initiative, and what services we would provide. And then there was this one paragraph in there that said, and if the revenues that I collect, in other words, of my sales, are insufficient to cover the expense, that would be covered by whoever this contract was with. And it was with different people at different times. So it was Mike Jensen did it one year, whatnot. Then it was this like weird organization. I still don't know if it's a real organization in Switzerland, and a person I've never met, never talked to, nothing. And I was really uncomfortable with that. But these are the integrity people. So it must be right. And of course, Barbara was a lawyer. She had a perfect explanation. So I wasn't really comfortable with it, but I couldn't imagine that it would be wrong. And then I did actually show the structure to my tax accountant and to my attorney. And they said, it definitely looks kind of fishy, but you're okay. You're protected. Like you're not doing it. You'll be okay. But it definitely looks pretty weird. So from 2017 on, we didn't even have a contract. Innovative Event Management hosted and assumed all liability for the course, period. But see, this is all details. I've never talked about this stuff before. I didn't have to. Moto Dodo seems to want to know about it. I don't have anything to hide.
Well, yeah, you
That's
don't
one of the
have
things that
to.
shocks me when people like, well, Ann, you're not giving detail. You're not giving detail. I'm like, trust me, dude, you don't want me to give detail. but give them what they asked for, right, Chris?
I guess.
The other one that they said, so we hit all 3 points. One, you were an unsuccessful as a wisdom course leader and were quietly removed. Total bullshit.
Well, there's gonna be tons of that. I was also
Bullshit. Like, I
dismissed.
wasn't
Mike Rinder
removed.
was also dismissed. I mean, it's,
Well, and like,
nobody can just leave of their own accord. Nobody can ever just find the thing distasteful and walk away. They have to smear you because the other members who are still there need to think that way about you so they don't start thinking about what you're saying. They can just dismiss you. It's all in the direction of that.
That's why my attorney said, they said, ooh, this is a different thing, because they're not using like kind of light landmark ideas to go, oh, Anne, you're just incomplete or do. This is information that related to my employment and contractual history. Like, so this has got a lot more
Yeah.
disinformation, misinformation flavor to it. That's why it really caught our attention. Like, ooh, something's going on here that is different.
Well, as you've mentioned already a couple times, right? This is a group that, any group can claim, we're all about integrity. But, this is where it becomes super, super clear that they're not. There's half truths, untruths, misinformation, leaving out information, very, very common tactics for all of this. They don't have to make things up out of whole cloth. They'll just take the truth and twist it. It's easier. And it kind of connects with some truth, and it's harder to disprove, and you got to get into more detail, and then people become frantic about having to explain themselves and getting the truth out there rather than just continuing to expose the abuses. Again, it's designed to do this, to wrap y'all up in it
I mean,
rather than just keep doing the work that you're doing that's disturbing them so much that they feel the need to do this. It's a distraction, it's a misdirection, it's purposeful, it's strategic, and it often works like a bomb unless you understand the anatomy of it and how they go about doing it. And
which
it
is
could well be, let me share one little story with you you might find funny. Tori Magoo shared this. She's an ex-Scientologist who was experienced the exact same things you're experiencing right now. 20 years ago, right? Back, when the internet was young, and she would be attacked routinely. And she came to learn, actually, she learned this while she was still in Scientology. One guy was assigned and created 10, 20 different social media accounts. And he would sit on his computer and just tab through the different accounts and make comments, sometimes even replying to himself on Facebook, on Twitter, on the various
This is
platforms,
happening on
right?
my YouTube channel, and because both you and John too have reported, I have a troller, which I kind of a
Mm-hmm.
bit of a badge of
Mm-hmm.
honor. Anyway, who goes on YouTube and makes all these like weirdo comments, which I ignore, and then usually YouTube or somebody reports them for harassment or whatever. I leave it because I was told it actually helps my algorithm. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay,
Yeah,
whatever. So
exactly. But it's probably just one guy with many accounts.
I see. Okay.
And it can be like that. It's so easy, right? It takes nothing. It takes no time whatsoever to set up these accounts. And once you have them, then you just start, knocking out comments or posts or whatever from all these different people. And you kind of, keep a little, this person, this identity is this, and this identity is this, but they're all fake. And it's
Right.
just, and it's just one dude doing this. So, I mean, this is what Scientology did. And
And could it be that these people were
could it be that,
electing?
you know,
Could it be that they're electing themselves to do this, that the organization, because I have a hard
could
time
be?
believing that the organization is actually, like, mandating this. Like, there was a point where somebody told me what they were saying on staff calls was, "We're really grateful to Anne for actually pointing out some of these things," and that's the main official organizational thing on the front is, "No, no. Yes, we've had some problems in the past. We have fixed it. We've got a new person in charge, blah, 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 blah," which is much smarter tactic, frankly. I don't 100% believe it. I think they believe it, but because they're not doing, anyway, there's still enough happening. Like they just put out I just got the staff notice they sent out related to this London Times article. And the whole thing is like lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. So I'm like, so either somebody's lying to Mick Levitt or they're lying actively to their staff and program leaders. But I don't particularly want to be the person that's in the middle of this. I figure that'll all come out when the case is in full tribunal and the evidence is presented. People can decide for themselves. That's where I have been. I wouldn't even be talking about this today if it weren't for Moto Dodo and being such an idiot. And then seeing like, oh, wow, this is how these groups silence critics.
Hmm. Hmm.
They attack like this, and it is impactful. Like, it's really
Well, it's a matter of being in the position that we are in, and I speak from a lot of years of experience of this, and I heard the same things when I was coming up, like you are, right? When I because I've been in this fight for quite a few years, and there is a lot of truth. There really just is to the growing the thick skin and learning to ignore it and learning to really block and ignore, like not just say that but then sit there and cogitate on it. Like I've done that. I've spent the hundreds of hours laying in bed freaking out about the attacks and stuff like that, or trying to figure out, how do I fight this, what do I do, what do I say, how do I, until you realize the old ways are the best ways: block and ignore. This is designed to distract you, right? And even the twists of truth are designed to distract you. I must correct the record. No, you actually don't need to do any such thing. Nothing they're saying, short of an actual legal threat from a lawyer, is anything you really need to pay any attention to at all. It's a lesson, hard one, and I realize that in saying that, people will ignore me until they learn it for themselves. And I'm not saying you, I just mean since we're talking about this in a
yeah,
general way on
no, that's what
video,
I wanted to know.
that it's I did it, I ignored it, it was the best advice, and it took me way too long to accept it. And so I throw it out now the same way it was given to me, right? In the hopes that people will learn from the experience of it, right? Scientology are champions at this fair game thing. They didn't invent it, not by any stretch of the imagination. Did they invent, you know, the concept of betrayal and loyal members going after people, right? This is like old as the hills, but the way they make it a dogmatic thing, the way they literally organize their activity so that there are people who are assigned to do this work, right? In Scientology, that's the Office of Special Affairs. Maybe Landmark has a counterpart to that, maybe not. But the group still generates this kind of thing because this is what extremism kind of drives people
Well,
to do.
that's the thing, like, I mean, it's so funny, the question of my book, I have a very different answer today than I did then, is this kind of stuff that goes, "Holy shit, Chris, I think they actually are a cult." Not
It's culty. We can
it's
certainly say
totally
that.
culty, but in part because I do think it's very possible that followers and people elect themselves to defend the organization, and I do know
Yeah.
from being on the inside of Landmark and high up in the circles that was something that the Department of Defense, as I jokingly call them, but that is something that they were actually out to protect Landmark. They've recognized that people can get sort of a kind of zealotry with their own work and then go out and do more damage to Landmark than good. And it is not sanctioned by it is people who take the ideas and take it upon themselves. So, that'll be that's the room I give you, Landmark. I'm gonna, until I have direct evidence otherwise, I'm gonna assume this is some sycophant, diehard fan who's taken it on themselves. Um,
It's a safe
But
assumption.
really caught my attention that if it is, there has to be misinformation, disinformation, or insidious gossip, which they claim they don't do, coming out of whether it's the Warner camp, those background people. I don't think it's Warner. I'm sure Warner hates my guts and has had plenty of screaming fits about me, but he would have that between him and Hanukkah, and a few others. He wouldn't do that publicly. He's too smart. I mean, he's just too smart for that.
Mhm.
So, and or Landmark, because I know their approach has been, they don't want to be seen with this. But guys, you got to do a better job rating in your graduates, and whatever gossip, or if gossip is their term, whatever misinformation or disinformation that you want to put out there about me, I'd suggest you stop, because I'll talk about it every time, just like this.
There you go.
I made that decision 2 years ago, and I want them to do better. I really do, honestly.
Of
I just
course.
want them to do better.
That's all
And
anybody wants out of this, because they
and most of
can do
all,
better.
they can do better, and I want all the people who who are this field, the field of personal and professional development, is so rogue, so no guidelines, no organizing. The laws are very weak. I have some really exciting guests coming up in the coming weeks. We're going to talk to a professor in criminology about truth and reconciliation and laws. We're going to have our Seek Safely Summit. We keep rolling it off, but we're going to have it. And we're going to talk about how we can build better. We can't talk about that without being honest about this. So, that's what we're here for. And I just, Chris, I really I appreciate having you on speed dial when this stuff happens.
Sure.
Fortunately, I was deep in my cold medicine. So when this happened, I was kind of like, wow, that's weird. I got more freaked out when I read it to my attorney friend on Monday, and she said, ooh, okay, that's insider. Something's different here. And then I was like, oh, yeah, maybe it is. Yeah, that's weird. And then I just made the decision. I'm going to call Kristen. Let's go talk about it and use this as a teachable moment. Moto Dodo, maybe they're listening. I don't know. But Moto, go get complete. And let's move on. Let's move on. So, Chris, any last words for you? I just really appreciate you so much.
I'll just say that I think I've made it clear that, you know, this is old as the hill stuff. I keep saying that because I want to make sure people understand that cults are an exaggeration of normal human behavior. They're not something new, different, wild, and alien. It's all the stuff we always do. We just dial it up to 11 when you're in a culty situation, right? And whether it's a cult of, you know, the leader is there, or there's a leadership, or there's a rule set or a belief set. I mean, you know, we don't have to be pedantic about this, right? We're really just talking about the way people get when they get a little too involved in their beliefs and ideas, and put a little bit too much importance on it and start making those things more important than the people around them. And I think that's an easy way to see it, how the priorities get out of whack there, right? There's nothing wrong with having beliefs. There's nothing wrong with having peak experiences. There's nothing wrong with seeking change or transformation or progress. None of that is wrong. You know, it gets wrong when we start using it to hurt people. And that's what we want to avoid. So, you know, this is just an aspect of that. And it comes right out of the best of intentions. This is a good thing. It must be defended. This is a good thing. I must take down the enemies. You know, stop and think a little bit, right? Before who are you calling an enemy and why? You know, these are good questions to stop and ask yourself.
Wow, that's really great. And as always, I always want to put a little shout out for our Healthy Healing group with Rachel Bernstein. If you're out there and you're kind of feeling on your own, please don't try to recover from this stuff all by yourself. There's fantastic people like Chris that you can work with also one-on-one. Come join the Healthy Healing group where we're learning and looking at all this stuff, because it isn't just happening here. It isn't just happening in Scientology and Landmark. It's happening in our politics, in our communities, in our school districts. These dynamics, like you said, they're human, they're happening. And to me, the best defense is to educate ourselves so that we see it before we're caught up in it. Thank you very much. And lots more to come.
Cool. Thanks for having me.